Hello and welcome. My name is Hydro Kimono, and for today's topic, I've picked the topic of art. Art is very subjective, and I thought it would make a really good topic to actually talk about. It seems like people really have strong opinions one way or another. Either you get art and you're really into it, or you don't see the point of it. I think for all of us, we know what we like, know what we don't like. For me, I was never an art major. I was never somebody who really studied art. I know some artists, but I couldn't tell you why they're a lot different than others per se. All I can do is look at a painting or read a poem or look at a, picture and say whether or not I like it. That's pretty much it. But I think that's most of us. So, let's start with the word artist. Artist to me is sort of a pretentious word. It's the umbrella that everything else is under. If you're a photographer, you're an artist. If you're a painter, you're an artist. If you're a writer, you're an artist. If you're a sculptor, you're an artist. And I think to a degree, if you're a model, you're an artist. If you're an actor, you're an artist. So what does that really mean? I think that what we need to do is take away the word artist and instead leave in what you're actually doing. I take a lot of pictures. I'm not sure that I would consider myself a photographer because I don't do it enough, and I'm definitely not a professional at it. So it's not my identity. If it was, I may consider myself a photographer, but for right now, we're going to say I'm a picture taker. Therefore, I wouldn't consider myself an artist. A painter who paints is just a painter, not necessarily an artist. So I think that that word has just lost a lot of meaning, and that everybody considers himself an artist that does any of those things. And then you get into computers and computer generated animation and things like that, or people doing a bunch of Photoshop work to spruce up a picture or put a bunch of graphics in there and things like that. So now they're an artist. So really, when you get down to it, who's not an artist? If you don't do any of those things, if you never take a picture with your iPhone, if you have never written a story, a poem, or anything, then maybe you're not an artist. But anybody who's taken a picture of the sky with an iPhone and put it on Instagram, are they an artist? So I think that that word really has lost a lot of meaning. So first of all, let's talk about writing. Writing is definitely an art form. You're telling a story. I think that poetry, in my opinion, has kind of, I wouldn't say it's necessarily dead art. I know I have said that in the past, and this is coming from somebody who used to write a lot of poetry, and really, way back when, years and years ago, that's what I considered myself. That's what I was good at. That's what people said I was good at. People who read my stuff really liked it. I got a lot of support and encouragement for it. And since then, I feel like maybe it's not really as, it's definitely not, it's a good thing that's not mainstream. So I don't want to use that word, but it's not as relevant, I would say. I think that now the journaling has sort of taken the place of the poetry. I think this right here, the vlogging, has taken the place of poetry, which is a sad thing. I really enjoyed it when I did it, and I have read a lot of really, really good poetry. I know several people who are very good poets, and it's not to say that at some point it won't come back. I think it's just one of those things where you go into your local bookstore. The poetry section is extremely small, whereas the fiction section is huge, and it's just not one of those things that people really seek out. It's almost gotten to the point where it's something that you are forced to do in high school to know what it is. If you ask your average person who says they're into poetry who they like, who are they going to say? They're going to say, I love Keats. I love Edgar Allan Poe. People like that. And these are just names that are being thrown out. You may get the hipster who will throw out somebody who is really obscure, or somebody who nobody else likes and wasn't a very good poet, and that's the person they're going to stick with. So Maybe it'll make a resurgence. I'm not, that's just my opinion. I'm not saying that it's horrible or that I don't like it or anything like that. I just think that there's been progression in that, as writing, we've progressed past that. So, the next thing is we'll talk about painting. Painting, I think, is one of my favorite forms of art. It's something that I can't do. I can write. I can take photographs. I can't sculpt. So that's one thing. But painting is something I've never been able to do. So painting is something that fascinates me. When I go to a museum and I see a bunch of paintings, yeah, sure, there are a lot of them where I think maybe I could have done that. I don't think that's very good. Whereas that's the one that everybody's like, this is genius. Yeah, it's a very cliche thing to say, and I completely realize that. People in movies have made fun of that. People on TV shows, all kinds of things, have said similar statements to that. So I realize that that's a really cliche thing to say, but I think it rings true. It's sometimes I do see something that I think is amazing. Like, I couldn't have done that. Most people couldn't have done that, and this person really has their own style, but it's all in the eye of the beholder. I may go in with 3 other people to a museum, and I may see something that I think is fantastic, and they may look at it and say, it's okay. Whereas they might be marveling at something completely different, and I just don't understand why it's so good. So, which is sort of the beauty of art. Everybody gets something completely different out of the experience. A lot like photography. For me, photography is something that I can do, and I think I do pretty well. But it's also something that you have to really find your niche. Black and white is going to be really popular, obviously. There's some people who can think of a scenario and make that happen. There's people who do a lot of post-production, and that's a whole different topic. For me, get it right in the camera the first time and do minor post-production after that, but when you're taking a picture of some random thing and then going into Photoshop and making it look completely different, it's making me, like, I jump in the air and then now I go back into Photoshop and make it look like I'm jumping on the moon. I don't know. To me, that's not the point. That's cool that you can do that. That is great. You can make movie posters and things like that, but at the end of the day, what I want to see in a photograph is something where somebody they had an idea, they set it up, they pushed down the shutter and they got the shot. That's what I want to see. Maybe they go in and put it in Photoshop and make the colors pop a little bit more or something like that, but going into Photoshop and just dragging in a whole bunch of random stuff that you found on the internet to make it a little bit more interesting, like confetti flying or something like that, is just, I don't get why that's so cool. And I think that that's the sad thing about photography, is it's really got to that point where it's not about camera knowledge anymore. It's not about being at the right place at the right time. It's not about setting up your shot. What it is about is having Photoshop knowledge and being able to do all of those types of things, which I think is really sad. It's really taken the sort of romance of taking the picture completely out of it, because now it doesn't matter what you got. You can go into Photoshop and make it be something pull 180 and make it something completely different, which I think really defeats the purpose. The whole purpose of photography is it's very personal. It's you and your camera and your subject, and that's it. That's the way it should be. I'm not saying I'm a purist, and I do think that it's important to do some post-production. You can make your pictures look a lot better, but graphic design is really cool, but to me, from a photographer point of view or a picture taker point of view, I would much rather just get the shot through the camera and show people what I actually saw with my own eyes through my camera, not through a bunch of computer editing tools. I'm not saying that's not an art form, because I do believe that it is. It's just, to me, not as interesting. It does take a lot of hard work, and I realize that anybody who's a photographer probably has a little bit easier job than somebody doing graphic design, because that is extremely difficult. And there are a lot of people who do really good work, but the end of the day, I feel like photography is going in that direction where you almost need to take a Photoshop class, not a photography class, which is sad. So the next thing I think is worth talking about would be models and whether or not they are artists. I think I would consider that part of the photography. I think that as someone who's a model, they have to go in and really become part of the scene. It's a lot of acting, I'm sure. I've never actually done it myself, but I've known people who did, and you have to go in there and be a character almost. You have to really make that scene because it's you. It's you and whatever's around you. And the focal point, if you're working with a model, is always going to be the model. So I think there's a lot of pressure there. You have to look a certain way. Probably a lot of pressure to really look perfect, but you have to do a little bit of acting too, and that I think would also be an art form. Plus, I think for a lot of people they have to do something that maybe at first is not very comfortable, and you have to do a lot to kind of get into that industry, I would think. So I just thought that was worth mentioning. I'm not sure that a lot of people would necessarily lump that in the same category as painting or photography or writing, but I think it's worth. I think they all go in tandem. Photography and modeling, I think that's two things that really go together. I guess you could make the same argument for photography in trees, or photography in clouds, or photography in cars, but those would all be legitimate arguments to that. And maybe that's a whole nother video. Anyway, I'm curious to hear what other people think about that, what other people think about art. Is it as subjective as I really think it is? Do you agree with my comments? Do you disagree? I'm curious to hear what other people think about it. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for watching, and have a good night.